Hello, I'm Chris Osmond, and this is Solutions. Enough complaining, let's fix America. Today I want to talk about the abstraction that trillions of dollars must represent to so many Americans these days, and to so many people around the world. Let's get to it. It's going to be a short video, but I'm just going to provide numbers that I've calculated. So if you want to do your own calculations, please feel free to do so. This first number, actually, I got from a show that I watched on YouTube called the Keiser Report. And they stated, and I verified this, that it would take 31,709.79 years to count to 1 trillion. Now, our government has passed the CARES Act, the H.E.R.E.O.S Act, or part of our government passed the H.E.R.E.O.S Act. And what is in that is trillions of dollars. So if it takes 31,000, a little closer to 32,000 years to count to a trillion, imagine trying to count to 4 trillion, which is what our government has been giving out so far. The majority or the lion's share of that money going to big corporations and to banks and entities like that. So 32,000 years, or let's stick with 31,000 years to count to a trillion. And basically that's based on if you counted $1 per second. So if you say 1001, 1002, 1003, it would take you almost 32,000 years to get to a trillion. So now 4 trillion, it would take 4 times as long, obviously. So like I said, that was on the Keiser report. And then the way I came up with the seconds is I took the trillion, divided it by years, then divided by the hours in the day, then the minutes in the day, and then the seconds of the day. And it came out to 31,709.79 years to count to a trillion. Now, it would only take 20 minutes to count to 1,200, which is what the first round of checks was for the majority of us. So if you could count to, imagine the disparity between counting to $1,200, which is what we got, to counting to 1 trillion, and then to counting to 4 trillion, which the majority of that money went to corporations. I think in the H.E.R.E.O.S Act, I estimated about maybe 420 billion was going to us, but 2.58 trillion was going to go towards businesses or corporations or to the wealthy to allow them to extract more wealth out of the rest of us. So $1,200, the one-time check that they gave us, it would take 20 minutes to count. The trillions that they gave them, each trillion, it would take 31,000 years for them to count. Now, for in America, before COVID-19, America was in debt to the tune of 23 trillion. Now imagine how many years it would take to count to 23 trillion. That must seem like a big abstraction to a lot of people. And then, as far as the world is concerned, the world owes 250 trillion before coronavirus. Now, that has to be mind-blowingly abstract to most people. It has to be such an abstraction to the 44% of Americans who only made $18,000 per year, which, by the way, would only take 5 hours to count to the 18,000. So imagine this. Let's extend that to what's going on right now, since the billionaires in this country have made like 24 billion since coronavirus really hit America hard. So if they're making 24 billion, and then you have someone like Jeff Bezos, who's at the top of the heap, he is on track, I guess, to become the Earth's first trillionaire. Now imagine that this guy couldn't even spend the money in several thousand lifetimes. He could not spend $1 trillion in several thousand lifetimes, but he couldn't even count it in 370 lifetimes if each one of those lifetimes was 100 years long. It would take him, just to count 1 trillion, it would take him 317 lifetimes, at each lifetime expanding 100, lasting 100 years. It would take him 317 of those lifetimes to count to $1 trillion if he became the first trillionaire. This is something that is becoming, this is one of the reasons why I look at the world now, and I feel like the simulation theory is becoming more of an argument for what we face in life today. It feels as if, you know, I'm a prototype of some creator that, you know, designed me, and he's testing my boundaries and limitations and my reactions to certain situations. Because right now it only feels like the world is getting worse and worse and worse. There don't seem to be any real bright spots out there on the horizon. I mean, we got Donald Trump as a president, which is outrageous for in and of itself. But then to replace him, the Democrats forced out the one guy who was actually pushing for things that would actually benefit the majority of us, who was Bernie Sanders. And in light of coronavirus and the damage that it's doing, everybody's starting to see that Bernie Sanders is a better choice. But the DNC is not going to allow Bernie Sanders to be the choice for America, because they don't want Medicare for all. They don't want a free college, free public college for people. They don't want a lot of the things that Bernie Sanders stands for. Bernie Sanders doesn't even seem to want those things, because he's not really pushing back against the DNC in a way that makes sense. He has this movement of millions of people behind him now, but he's not motivating them to stand up. He's basically telling them to fall in line and get behind Joe Biden. And then Joe Biden, how is he different than Trump? He's just a lesser version of Trump. He speaks poorly when he's out. He talks down to a lot of the people that go to his rallies. He talks like Trump to a lot of these people at some of his rallies. In some cases, he speaks even worse than Trump at some of these rallies. He's been accused of allegedly not only just sexual misconduct, but of rape. His family is as corrupt as Trump's family, because you look at his son, who was on that board. He'd been on a couple boards of companies that he should never have been on, but he was on those boards because Biden was the vice president. And now, with all this Russiagate stuff collapsing and all this interaction with international companies, it's it's being exposed that Joe Biden did play a part in forcing other countries to change their leadership so that it would benefit America. I mean, there's a tape that's come out of a hot mic or a phone conversation where he's talking to some guy in Ukraine or something, and he's promising him $1 billion in monetary support from America if they change out this prosecutor or something that was investigating a company that his son was involved in. Look it up. I don't have time to maybe I'll look it up. I'll put a link down below. Anyway, so these are all the things that make me start to suspect that this is not, something's wrong with the world today, because even the way people think is kind of crazy. It's like just illogical. Recently, we had a woman who took her autistic son, who was nonverbal, and she said she was run off the road. This is in Florida. She said she was run off the road on a very busy street. First off, so that brought her story into question. She was run off the road, and then a couple black guys came up and demanded drugs from her. And when she told them she didn't have drugs, they took her son. And basically, she said they took her son, and she never saw him again. And then the next day, the child is found dead in a lake. And as soon as I heard the story, I was like, this sounds like Susan Smith." The only difference is that supposedly the car that they were in was supposed to be a stolen car. But it turned out that the mother, of course, killed the kid. And what's worse is that, okay, that's crazy in and of itself. But what's worse is that she tried to kill the kid earlier that day. And people came along thinking that the kid was drowning, that she wasn't trying to force the kid to drown. So they saved the kid. And then she goes and takes the kid to another lake. Now, yes, that's crazy. But how does she not realize that she got away with it the first time and nobody got on her? And so she's going to try it the second time when there's these people out there who witnessed her with the kid in the water almost drowning. People are crazy. Something's wrong with the way they think. I mean, even when they're crazy, that's even extending the craziness. That doesn't even make sense for a crazy person to think, oh, I got away with it. Let me try it again in the exact same manner. Anyway, so this is the problem that I see with the world. People are just staying ignorant. And like I said, I've been saying for the past few days, I just started this one, is ignorance will be the downfall of America and the world and humanity. because people are not informing themselves as to what's going on in the world. And that's the solution for today. People, you need to inform yourself. You need to stop watching stop paying attention to the bread and circuses that they're putting out there, because the last stage of empire is bread and circuses. The Roman Empire is where that term comes from, and it's because the Roman leaders basically started supplying people with food so they wouldn't revolt, and they started entertaining them with all kinds of gladiatorial games so they would be distracted. Right now, we're distracted by all these stupid shows with all these wealthy people acting like idiots. We need to pay attention, at least a little bit of attention, to what's going on in the world. And not just say, oh, I hate you because you're a Republican, or I hate you because you're a Democrat. Because we've had those two parties going back and forth for decades now, and they don't ever seem to really solve the problems that's going on. The country is continually to get worse. And look at like leaders like Nancy Pelosi, like Chuck Schumer, like Mitch McConnell. They've all been in office. Well, not Schumer, he's been in less time. But Mitch McConnell and Nancy Pelosi have been in office since the mid 80s. And to me, life has gotten worse since the mid 80s. I think America kind of peaked in the 80s, but that might be my personal bias because those were my formative years. But anyway, we need to wake up. We need to vote all these people out of office and continue to vote any newcomers out of office that do not act on the will of the people. Because having the same elected officials in there for 30, 40 years, it's only making the country worse, because they become entrenched and they only look out for themselves in the end. I mean, look at Nancy Pelosi's, the scandal with her and stocks, and how is she worth $100 million, over $100 million, when she's been a public servant for 30 years, or an elected official for 30 years. They don't make that much money. They don't make millions of dollars every year. So, wake up. Again, this is Solutions, Enough Complaining. Let's fix America. And thank you for joining me. I hope to see you again for the next episode. Bye.